democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Washington, a battle over the future of the Internet appears to be intensifying. The Federal Communications Commission recently issued a series of rules on net neutrality dictating how Internet service providers manage their networks. One aim of the rules is to bar companies from giving preferential treatment to content due to considerations such as political or financial interests. The rules are facing opposition, and a string of lawsuits have already been filed. Telecom giant Verizon has sued to overturn the net neutrality rules, while a coalition of public interest groups have filed lawsuits in an effort to strengthen and eliminate loopholes that could allow phone and cable companies from dividing the Internet into fast and slow lanes. Today, we spend the hour on a groundbreaking new book that examines an untold story about the American media system, that looks at how the fight over the Internet is just the latest chapter in a centuries-old debate on the government's role in regulating new technology. The book is called News for All the People, the epic story of race and the American media. It is written by our very own Juan Gonzalez, co-host of Democracy Now! For the whole 15 years of its existence, and Joe Torres. The book also examines how the press, dating back to the very first newspaper in the United States, has played a pivotal role in perpetuating racist views among the general population. In addition, the book recalls the lives of many unsung, pioneering Black, Latino, Native American, and Asian American journalists who repeatedly challenged the worst racial aspects of the white-owned media. Juan Gonzalez and Joe Torres join us today in studio for the hour. In addition to being co-host of Democracy Now!, Juan is a prize-winning columnist at the New York Daily News, former president of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. Among his previous books, Harvest of Empire, A History of Latinos in America. Joe Torres is the senior advisor for government and external affairs for Free Press, the National Media Reform Organization. He's the former deputy director of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. It's great to have you both with us. And Juan, usually you're sitting next to me.
It's difficult on the other side of the table for a change. Yes, unusual.
But it is my delight. You both have been working on this for more than 7 years, and of course, bringing your life experience to this as well. Juan, start off by laying out the thesis of News for All the People.
Well, one of the things that I've tried to do after about 30-something years of working in the corporate media, as well as obviously 15 years here with Democracy Now!, but even before that as someone who's always on the media aspect of community and labor organizing for going back to 45 years, I never was able to clearly understand why our media system is the way it is. The American people love to hate the media in terms of their constant frustration with how newspapers and television and radio don't provide an accurate coverage. But it's especially true among people of color. African Americans and Latinos and Native Americans and Asians have always felt denigrated and somehow misrepresented deeply by the American media system. But I didn't understand quite why there's been so much resistance to change by the system. So Joe and I decided about 7 years ago we were going to get to the bottom of this by really examining the entire history of the American system of news and how it developed. And we were shocked as we delved deeper into the archives all around the country, of presidential archives and national archives in Washington. We began examining a lot of the old press, that there'd never really been a cogent theory developed of how the system has developed. And so we've come up with a theory that we try to explain in the book, but we also have a lot of documentation of how things have happened with our media system. The basic theory that we've come up with is that one, that the media system has never been a free market system per se, but that the government has played critical roles throughout the history of the development of news and information in the United States in adopting policies that affected how our system would develop. The government subsidized many of the technologies that eventually developed, whether it was the telegraph, satellite broadcasting, the original research into the Internet. So taxpayers funded a lot of the research and development that created our different media platforms. And at critical junctures, this new technology always subverts the existing order. And we've identified actually 5 major periods in American history where there was a new technology developed, and that affected how the system was operating, and Congress had to step in and rewrite the rules of the system. And so, other scholars have called these the constitutive moments in the history of the media system. So we've tried to outline how that developed, from the early post office for newspapers, the rise of the telegraph that really made possible the wire services that dominated news throughout the late 19th century, the rise of radio, then of cable television, because television was really just an extension of radio, the rise of cable television, and finally the rise of the internet. Each of these new technologies has created a huge debate over what is the role of the media in a democracy, and what is the role of the government in establishing the rules of operation by which all the different groups in society will be able to have access or be heard or produce news. And so that's the general, and one of the things that we've uncovered is that this fundamental debate that is constantly occurring is, does our nation need a centralized system of news and information, or does it need a decentralized or autonomous system? And which serves democracy best? And it turns out that in those periods of time when the government has opted for a decentralized or autonomous system, democracy has flourished, has had a better opportunity to flourish. Racial minorities have been able to be heard more often and to establish their own press. And in those periods of the nation's history, when policies have fostered centralized news and information, that's when dissident voices, racial minorities, marginalized groups in the society are excluded from the media system. So that the issue of centralism versus localism is critical to a democratic media system. So that's the overall theory that we've developed in terms of how the role of government, constitutive policies, the seminal moments when new technology subverts the existing order, and the role of the battle between localism and centralism as the fundamental battle in whether we have a democratic media system or a controlled and authoritarian media system.
And Joe Torres, why did you write News for All the People? And how did you come up with that title?
Well, the title is it took a long time to come up with this title, and actually is a title that we kind of agreed upon at the end, and we actually kind of like now. So titles are tricky things, as you probably know. But we decided to write this book because when Juan became president of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists in 2002, there was great upheaval going on in that year. Bush came into office, and Michael Powell was the chairman of the FCC, and in that year he wanted to relax our nation's ownership rules. He wanted to basically get rid of Michael Powell, the son of Colin Powell. What he basically wanted to do was get rid of most rules. He wanted to allow one company in the largest market to own the newspaper, up to 3 television stations, 8 radio stations, and a local cable franchise, all in the same market. And working for the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, and when Juan became president, we basically understood that consolidation is not good for newsrooms. It's not good for the quality of journalism. So as journalists, we should care about the quality of journalism. But as people of color, which Juan is talking about centralization versus decentralization, when you have greater centralization of media, this means that we cannot tell our own stories, that people of color cannot own radio stations, can own television stations, and when other people tell our stories, they tell it wrong. And so what is the greatest promotion you can have as a journalist is to actually own your station and to be the boss. And when we have other stations or when we have other folks telling our stories, this is why we get the kind of coverage that historically where we are marginalized, and we believe we need, so as journalists, we believe we needed to get into that battle. It was a tough battle because journalists are naturally not inclined to want to take on their bosses. They would get involved in issues like free speech issues. But when it comes to getting in the way of their bosses, trying to get bigger and please shareholders, that's another thing. So, but we got involved, and that's how we started off. And then in 2004, basically, we wanted to educate our members and journalists of color about this issue. We wrote a pamphlet called How Long Must We Wait? We distributed it at the Unity Convention in 2004. From there, we got some funding from the Ford Foundation, and it led to work on this book. So that's how we wanted to take the lessons we learned, even in that pamphlet, and expand upon it. So that's what we did.
Well, we're going to go back through the history of the U.S. media after break, and we're going to talk about some of the great crusading journalists, Ida B. Wells, who crusaded against lynching, Frederick Douglass. Even we'll talk about where Jose Marti